Hello, LCS fans. Blue Jay here, JNT 250 with me, and we got episode 23 of the Clown Fiesta podcast starting right now. And for me, I think this is the most exciting time of the year for LCS fans. And if you're wondering why I say that, well, Worlds always comes around every year, kind of kicks the shit out of hopes and dreams that North America may have, and then the off season follows suit right after, and somehow always manages to restore hope when all the LCS when all the LCS owners start throwing their wallets around, and that's the kind of time that we're in right now. We will definitely get to all of the off-season rumors. Of course, that's what this episode is going to be about. And then there's some other stuff too, like TSM drama. What would the LCS be without TSM drama? But before we get into any of that, JNT, I'll let you bring us into our first topic. We got some LCS format changes, which are pretty pog. Let's fill people in on those.
Yeah, so spring is no more. Spring split doesn't matter, as everyone always knows. So the LCS is making a major change to the way that both the league plays out and how the seasons play out. There will no longer be two separate splits of spring and summer. It will now just be one whole season, but it's kind of weird because it is technically split up into spring and summer. But the season will be counted as one. The record from your quote-unquote spring and summer games will just be all one record. And they've also added an extra game between each team. So if you didn't know, in the spring split, each team would play each other team 2 times. You multiply that by 2 because there's 2 splits. But now they're also adding an extra round of games. So the total games in the entire year will go up from 36 to 45, which is very good. More games, more bangers, more 40-minute bangers. That's what we love here in North America.
I think it's good for so many different reasons. Obviously, it's good for the fans, right? And because you get more games to watch. But then the owners win. I think that they're able to sell their sponsorship packages for more. And then the players, I will say it's not all great for the players because some players may have signed their contracts with the assumption that they would be playing in the old format. But the good news for players is that they're always talking about how scrims don't matter that much and how they're not that helpful and real games is the real practice. Well, guess what? You've got more real games now. So now you have more real practice. So if you ask me, it's a win-win-win, honestly. And I remember talking with you about this. Do you remember we talked about this like a month or two ago, you and I? We considered doing a whole episode. We said to each other, like, maybe in the off season, we'll do a whole episode about potential format changes for Worlds and for the LCS regular season. And I was saying, like, just snap spring. And then sure enough, they did it.
Yeah.
They listened to my prayers. And so I'm hella excited for this. I think there's so much good that comes from this. And one of the funniest things about this, though, is that all year long there was the debate about whether spring split matters, right? That was the discussion. Doublelift straight up came out and said no, it doesn't matter, and then everyone was like, it matters, man. And of course it did matter. But with these changes, you kind of basically got to just give it to him and say, all right, Doublelift, you were right, it didn't matter.
Yeah.
Like, that's one of the funniest things for me about all this. But anyways, yeah, give me some more of your thoughts. Any other thoughts that you may have on this?
Well, one thing that I was thinking about when you were talking about how it affects the players because they might have signed their contracts with the knowledge that, there's going to be 2 separate splits of spring and summer. And that was just making me think, how does this affect, roster changes and the way that teams want to act in the sort of middle point of the season? Because obviously, if you've watched Travis Gafford's video where he basically announced it, he basically said that, the format of like the LCS schedule will stay pretty much the same, where there will be games on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And then there's going to be a break in the middle where they do some sort of little mini playoff tournament with the best team being the North American representative at MSI. Yep. And then, there's that whole player break in the middle between MSI. There's a bit of a break, then summer split would start. But it just makes me think that, for teams that are, in the LCS and you maybe weren't one of those teams who you weren't the team that went to MSI, you weren't one of the teams that made that little mini playoff tournament, how that affects teams making roster decisions. Because if you're going into a season, obviously both your quote unquote spring and summer split games all count as one now. So and I don't understand, like I'm trying to figure out if that's going to make teams more hesitant to make roster swaps. Because, you're not exactly going to have a ton of time to like rebuild up that synergy. And all your poor performances from spring are going to affect your summer results, or will that make teams want to stick to their rosters for a longer period of time, knowing that they have more games to play than before? Or is it going to have the opposite effect where they have the thought that, okay, this roster is not working out at the start, let's just scrap it so we have more time to catch up. So I think it'll be really interesting how that affects the players, if it's beneficial or if it's worse for the players, if rosters are now not necessarily on like a split by split basis, or they weren't really, it was on a yearly basis, but we do see a lot of player contracts terminated in the middle of spring and summer. How that kind of affects that, whether that number will rise or fall based on the new format changes.
So, like you said, there's a lot of things that can happen, and we can't necessarily predict exactly what's going to happen in the future. But here's what I see happening, anyways: is I think that this forces rosters or just teams to get going earlier. I think that every year we see a very slow start to spring. Like last year, there wasn't too many teams that were too eager to go boot camp in Korea. It seemed like it was just Cloud9's bot lane. I'm sure there was maybe some others, but that seemed to be the only actual group of people that went to Korea early to start boot camping. I think this forces teams to get going earlier, and I think that's a very good thing for the LCS. However, it might not be good for uh for burnout. That could be an issue. So I would say that there is some good and some bad. The other thing that I will say is that just like in traditional sports, you might see some towards the end of the split, you'll see more rookies getting some playtime, I think. Think about like if let's say you're CLG, and we'll use them just because they finished last or towards last. If you're CLG or Immortals and you're like, I don't know, what's a potential record? You're like, I don't know, 5 and like 27. Well, maybe now you're like, okay, we are out of it. Let's start playing some of our rookies because there's no chance that we can make it back into playoffs. So that's where I think that the end of the season will actually be a little bit different there.
Yeah, we really, like you said, we can't exactly predict everything that's going to go on. It obviously is way more dependent on like the inner workings of teams and how they feel about it. Because if you have teams that, let's say, in the start of the season, their LCS team is performing very poorly, but their academy team, for example, starts playing very, very well. We might see these bottom teams more willing to sub in their academy players, or even like we kind of saw with the Immortal situation last year, just flip your entire roster, throw the academy into LCS, and then demote your LCS team to academies. So we'll really have to see, but I think it'll be very interesting to see how this kind of affects NA's willingness to, improve much faster at the start of the season and play different players.
Yeah, and I think there will be some other little things that are like little changes as well that will come with this. So I think one of the good things about these format changes is now a small slump no longer completely ruins your season, right? Like if you went on a 4 or 5 game losing streak and an 18 game split, your split's kind of just done. And that's what summer was. So, like what decided if you go to Worlds was an 18 game season, right? Because it was just summer that really mattered for that. So
Mm-hmm.
now that you have a 45 game season, it's like if you lose 4 or 5 games in a row, that is not the end of the world. There is still more time to make that ground up. That's one thing. Another thing that I wonder is if playing these teams more, like you only get one extra game on them, right? Maybe you get a little bit more rivalries having played these teams more and more. That is something I'm not too sure about, but it's something that I thought, well, maybe you create more rivalries by just having more games. There's more, I don't know, just a quick little thought there that could be possible.
Yeah, well, it will be very interesting to see. Obviously, we're going to get more games, and that'll be more content for us to cover and talk about, which is always good. I think it'd be
Yeah.
crazy. It'd be crazy for the number of games to get reduced even more. Like that. That would have been ridiculous. But more games,
Yeah.
poggers.
Well, and the other thing too is that it looks like they want to continue Friday, Saturday, Sunday as their main game days. It looks like they want to do 5 games Friday, 5 Saturday, and 5 Sunday. Whereas in the most recent split, we saw 2 Friday and then 4 and 4 being Saturday, Sunday. So now you're going to have teams play 3 games every weekend rather than the 2 that they were doing before. So that's how they're going to try to fit this all into different weeks. And it looks like, I guess by that math, and you're not supposed to do math live on stream, but I guess you would have 15 weeks of LCS by that logic. If you so instead of I guess it would have been 18 because you would have done 9 in spring, 9 in summer. So even though there are more games, the season should be in fewer weeks. So maybe there's more breaks in between somehow. I don't know exactly how they plan to
It's
fit it all in.
it's kind of, I guess, just to speculate a bit on the format. It's kind of all dependent on what they feel. Like maybe they do like 4 games a day. So some teams might play 3 games a week, some teams might play 2. Or what they do is, maybe they do like a much shorter version, but they do like super weeks. I know like EULCS, they recently they did a couple super weeks in the middle during their seasons as to shorten the schedule a bit due to the coronavirus pandemic. But we'll have to see. I think the most likely scenario is they try to find some way to keep the number of weeks of LCS the same. Like, I don't think they would reduce it to 15 weeks.
Hold on a second though, because in the video that Travis Gafford released, he actually said that what they're planning on right now is the Friday, Saturday, Sunday style.
Yeah,
format.
but that doesn't necessarily mean they're going to play 5 games a day. Like, they could play 4 games a day. Some teams might play 3 games in one.
That's what he said in his thing. That they're going to play 5 every. But I think what you're trying to say also is that none of this is set in stone.
Exactly.
Like, this is still subject to change, right?
Yeah.
So none of this is. And there's some other little things that I want to touch on before we move on, because there was some other, I don't know, just notable things. Like, I think you mentioned the little format to get to MSI, right?
I think it's like a 6-team playoff based on your record in that first half.
Yeah, pretty much what they did already in spring, I believe.
Yeah,
I think that's what they did was a 16 playoff, but now it's just like a bracket to see who goes to MSI. But some other things is that it looks like there's going to be fewer academy games. They're gonna this was very unclear to me. I couldn't really grasp what the idea is, but they're gonna try to kind of blend the academy league with whatever tier 3 league they may have. So this gives teams extra incentive to go sign more young, unproven talent, I guess. I don't know exactly how that's going to work yet, but that's what they're planning on for now. And then there's supposed to be, Riot is supposed to do some sort of kickoff tournament before the season even starts. I have no idea what that's supposed to look like. But we'll see what I don't know. Maybe that's just to get teams warmed up.
Maybe.
I don't know what the prize is or what the reason is for trying hard during this tournament is. I don't know, but regardless, there's supposed to be a tournament, and that's the news for now. Anyways, going into what we would call spring 2021, but I guess going into the 2021 season, that's going to get hard to get used to, man. Not calling it a split or spring or summer. But anyways, that's all the stuff we have for now. And like I said, I just need to harp on this, that none of that is official. Riot could still be working on seeing if there's any little tweaks to that they want to make, and see if there's anything that they want to change for 2021. But that's what we got. Those are the rumors for now. Anything else before we move on to TSM drama?
Nope. More TSM drama. Omega lol.
Fill the folks in at home on what this TSM drama is. It seems like Lena's back in the news again, but this time it's not exactly so much her fault as it is someone else's.
Yeah, I was just trying to pull it back up here just so I can read it out on stream. But for the people who don't know, who maybe haven't been following, league news or content that much since the season is over, but a couple days ago on Twitter, I guess at the time, this pretty much random personality who was within the LCS, people didn't exactly know because I don't think anybody knew.
He's the assistant coach.
No, but I mean, at the time, like, people didn't really know who. Like, did you? Like, what I'm saying is, did you know who he was before you actually had to research this guy? Like, you didn't? I didn't recognize the name.
Oh, I knew the name, and for some reason, I knew Immortals. I didn't know what in Immortals, so I didn't know what he was.
Well, a relatively unknown person within the LCS found his way onto a little Twitter/Reddit post where he was basically calling out TSM and specifically Lena for burning a lot of bridges with their with the LEC in terms of signing players and whatnot. And I'll just read out. Basically, what I'm reading out is a Twitter DM that somebody not necessarily leaked, because I mean, we'll discuss this a little bit later, but this guy literally said to put this on Twitter, and we'll discuss this a bit later. But I'll read it out for the people. It says, Lena has lied about why TSM is having trouble importing, by the way. That org has burnt so many bridges with talent, and it's now affecting them. I'll be very open and say, in zero talk with a single EU player, did any state fear of COVID, public interest, public unrest, etc., stopping them from deciding. Lena is lying that this is a reason or fears of visas because Riot is working with the US government on visas. TSM is fucked due to their own shitty behavior in the past finally catching up to them. Feel free to tweet most of this.
So basically what he's trying to say is that Lena is saying we can't sign any players because they don't want to come over here for COVID or for public unrest or whatever
Or they
because of
can't
like
or they can't secure visas.
or they've burned so many bridges and stuff like that is basically uh what he's saying, honestly. But the thing is there's no real validity to that. There's a chance that he's right. I want to say that, like, I'm not saying he is right, but there's a chance that he's right. But the thing is there's no way he actually knows that. That's my issue with this, is that it is not his place to go on and speak about this because he is not in the TSM organization. So even if he hears something from other EU players, he can't guarantee that is the case because he's not working for TSM. He's not in on their discussions. So I don't think it's fair for him to say anything like that. And I think a bunch of people already discredited what he said because of who he is and because he's not very known. But I think people should discredit his words more so because of what he actually said. Like, it's just there's no, it could be true, but there's no way we know that it's true. There's no way he knows that it's true. So that's why I don't get why you would go out and say stuff like that. And then to top it off, to say feel free to, what did he say? Feel free
Oh,
to tweet this or something.
it just he just said feel free to tweet most of this.
Yeah, like, I don't know. I don't know what the game plan was with that. I don't know in what scenario you think that's a good idea. I will say he did at least apologize. I'll give him that. People do fuck up sometimes and they do really stupid shit for reasons that make no sense. At least he recognized it was a mistake and he went and apologized. However, in his apology, J&T, there was a little bit that you took exception with, and I totally agree with you. What part was that in his
Yeah,
apology?
let me pull up the apology. Also, I just want to get back to like when the whole situation broke. Like, I feel like a lot of people sort of jumped on this bandwagon, and like there was a ton of like flame on Twitter and Reddit just like jumping on it, saying, "Oh yeah, TSM is so dog," and like back to more like TSM dysfunction.
You're
But
gonna
like,
get that every time there's
yeah,
TSM news, though.
exactly.
Every
But I
time
mean,
there's enough TSM haters out there.
when I first saw this, like I obviously wanted to hear like more on this because you can never believe something like this when it just kind of comes up randomly out of the blue. And like even Veteran, who is a very notable figure in the LEC in terms of coaching in the past and like, you know, having a lot of inside information, he discredited this right away, saying from his personal experiences that a lot of European players are actually willing to go to NA specifically because the stature of Cloud9, Team Liquid, and TSM. Like that, he was basically saying that like EU players are willing to go to NA, but only to those three teams, TSM being included in one of those three teams. So I don't know, it just came out like super weird, and yeah, he then released an apology about it. But the main problem that I have with his apology is right towards I'm just trying to find it right here. Where is it?
There's just a line in the middle somewhere, right?
I'm just trying to find the line. It's not even.
It's towards the start, I think.
Okay, I'll just read it out. First and foremost, I'd like to apologize for the reckless comments I made to a third party regarding TSM. Without full knowledge of the organization's current situation, the conversation itself was unprofessional and inappropriate by nature. Okay, here it is. I never intended those comments to be publicized. So, okay. In the DMs that got released on Twitter, he literally said to feel free to tweet most of this. And in his apology, he's contradicting that statement completely by saying that he never intended for those comments to be publicized. I don't know if he like took the time to actually read, like to look at the photo that got released, saying like, I don't know, like it's just silly.
Feel free to tweet this out.
Yeah, and then he
to be publicized though.
Yeah, and then he apologizes to Lena after, saying that it's like inappropriate for her to like discredit her or her like position. I don't know. It was just a bunch
The rest of
like,
the apology was pretty good. What's ironic though to me is that like there's no way Lena can complain about the apology, right? I don't know if people remember the apology that she put out.
Yeah.
For
oh god.
after, like, that was an awful apology. So like if we're talking about level of apologies, this one's a little bit better than that, I guess. And I'm sure Lena probably can't complain about that. But yeah, anyway, that was just a funny little ironic thought.
I don't think any TSM drama at this point is good for any of the parties involved, because anybody who's involved in any sort of TSM drama just ends up getting like just reamed on Twitter.
Yeah. Well, and luckily for him, some other news dropped the same day that was when the
overshadowed
PERKZ news
it.
dropped.
Yeah.
Thank God for him. But I will say that even with that stuff dropping, like, this is such a big hit to his career, I would say. Like, okay, here's what I'll say. I don't know if Immortals is going to take any action on this, but like Immortals is a team that is struggling for fans in the league, right? They don't win a lot. There's not a huge amount of IMT fans out there in the first place. And now you have an extra reason for teams to not want to cheer for your team, right? You're going to piss off the most popular team in the league, you're going to piss off a lot of fans with that. And so I wonder if he actually gets let go. And let me be clear, I am not one for cancel culture. I am not. But when you're in such a desperate position like Immortals is, I wouldn't be surprised if they let him go. They're like, holy shit, as if teams need more reasons to harp on Immortals, you know? So I don't know. I don't know. I hope that he doesn't get let go again because I hate cancel culture. I'm a firm believer that people make mistakes. You know, if it's something that happens time and time again, sure, let them go. You know, like, but I don't like when people just have stupid mistakes once and then they get fired or whatever it is. But well, I mean, we'll see how that ends up going.
Not to go like too far down the pipeline with this, but in terms of like this whole cancel culture thing, like for me, I have a problem with it when you're getting canceled because it's something outside of your field of work. But my problem with this specifically is that this is inside his field of work, and this is specifically related to his job.
That
and
is a very good point.
he's hindering his organization to do their job. He's hindering himself and his reputation, and he's pissing off a fellow organization within the LCS, being TSM. So while I do agree that, sometimes cancel culture or whatever and these kinds of things can get taken to the extreme, the difference with this I find is that this is specifically related to his field of work and like, what is actually like important and what he gets paid for. And he's managing to fuck that up himself. So
no, you make a really good point there. That's something that I hadn't considered, but you're absolutely right. And of course, cancel culture is like a very like wide term, but we don't need to get into the specifics.
Yeah, I didn't want to go too far down the rabbit hole here.
No, of course not. But yeah, there's a lot of things that encompass cancel culture, and I still think that this would be one of them, but we don't need to get into that. Any other thoughts on this before we move on? I think we're going to end up talking about TSM in just a little bit. So I don't think we're done with the TSM stuff, but do you want to move on to some contract and whatever kind of news?
Yep.
All right, what's first on the list? Let's start with Licorice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I'll let you take it away, actually. Go for it.
So in the past couple days, some fairly big and notable free agent news has been released about two notable players that have very large contract buyouts. We'll start with Licorice, and just I'll state this before we get into the whole thing. All of this information that you can find on Twitter that we will link and that we are discussing right now has been reported by Jacob Wolf, a very notable journalist in the esports scene. So just, this is all according to him. It's not confirmed by anyone else or, not reported on by anyone else. But the buyout for Licorice, according to Jacob Wolf, was at $1.75 million by Golden Guardians, but who have now pulled out of that deal or agreement due to budget concerns. And then following that, right after, FlyQuest, who is the number 2 bidder at $1.5 million, pulled out for the exact same reason of Golden Guardians, with budget concerns. So,
like, I don't know where to start with this. What a mess. Like, I can only see two options, and I hope maybe someone else can tell me if there's a third option. But for me, it's like you either have Golden Guardians and FlyQuest that should be embarrassed because like why would you do that? Or okay, like what are the odds that you have two different teams pull out of budget concerns? You know what I'm saying?
mm-hmm.
What are the odds of that? How does this happen? How do you go into an off season not knowing exactly what your budget is, and who offers something that they can't afford? How does this happen twice? So to me, it doesn't make any sense.
Yeah,
You got Golden Guardians or FlyQuest that should both be embarrassed, or maybe they're just trying to like force other organizations to spend more. Like, oh, if we bid this much, that'll force TSM to waste $2.5 million on Licorice. Like, I'm so confused as to how that happens.
Yeah, I was trying to like piece it together myself just to like figure out like one, what this means exactly, and two, like why it sort of all occurred like this. And my one thought was that, obviously there was the big news when it originally got announced, following the OPL news that, C9 was going to promote Fudge and then Licorice was going to be up for buy. And at that time, if you're an LCS organization and you hear that one of the best players in the entire league is up for bid now, like you're gonna rush to the counter with as much money as you can in your hands, like pulling loose bills out of your pocket to try to get this player before anyone else can scoop him up. So that could be one reason for like them bidding a lot of money and then, pulling out later due to budget concerns, because maybe at the time they had thought, oh, this is what, like, oh, we got to get him, and then later they thought, okay, this is too much money, let's like reevaluate and see what the rest of the league has to say about this. But the other reason that I think is, I guess, a little bit more plausible is that both of these teams are two teams that have major, like, I don't know what's the word, like contingencies for their offseason plans. Like with Golden Guardians, apparently FBI is up for bid, and at least in the Golden Guardians realm, maybe some sort of FBI bidding sort of failed through, and they were expecting to use that money for FBI on Licorice, or they were using this bid for Licorice to help, maybe gain another player from Golden Guardians. Like if they get Licorice, that'll make maybe like a better mid laner come to the team or something like that.
Yeah, it feels like we're not getting the whole story. That's what it feels like.
And
it feels like there's a piece that's missing.
Yeah, I kind of had that same thought with FlyQuest. Like, oh, maybe they were trying to use Licorice as like the piece to be able to keep PoE, as we'll later, talk about PoE a little bit more. But he declined his player option with FlyQuest, and maybe FlyQuest is using Licorice up for bid as an opportunity to try to keep their roster together, because obviously Licorice is an upgrader over solo. And who knows, maybe they were trying to use Licorice as the glue to hold this team together, maybe to have it go one more season before the players would inevitably want to leave if they perform badly.
Yeah, and that's honestly, I'm wondering, where is TSM in all of this, right?
Yeah.
Why is TSM not in the talks for Licorice? For me, out of the top laners that are available, it seems very obvious to me that you would want Licorice over Impact all day. I don't see why you would not. Like, it's not even that Licorice is that much better than Impact. But we've just seen what happens when you go to Worlds without a top laner that can't win lane. Like you actually need to play to win. And Impact doesn't necessarily do that. He plays tanks and like he plays slow. And don't get me wrong, you can play tanks. But when it comes down to draft, you need to be able to threaten both, or else teams will just walk all over you. And I think that that's something we saw at Worlds, and that's already for me a reason why I just absolutely want Licorice over Impact, and it's not even close.
Yeah, the thing for me with the Licorice and Impact sort of debate, or like who would you rather have, and like how you would kind of work that all out, the thing that I've sort of found is, I think ever since Season 8, we've really seen like top lane become much more of like a focused role in terms of carry potential and resources that you put into the role. Kind of will happen with the Shy in Season 8, and we even saw with this past World Championship, players like Bin, players like Nuguri, players like Zoom, players like Wonder, these high resource, huge champion pool carry players are essential to being a great team. And the way that I see it is that Impact is a player that you want to, like, he's a solid player on a good team. And he makes, like, unless you have top players in every other role, you're only going to be a good team. Whereas Licorice is that kind of player that you sub in to be a great team, a team that does want to contend at Worlds, at MSI, win your regional league. Because you need to have these kinds of players if you want to be at the top. You need to have these carry potential players that can play all the styles that are needed, all the champions that are needed, and can be flexible. And, as much as I love Impact, because I think he's actually a really great player, and he's still continued, basically he's continued the same form that he's been on for the most part since like Season 7. And I think he would be a good addition to any team. But Licorice is the kind of player that you do need if you do have very high Worlds ambitions.
Yeah, and so for me, okay, if you're not going after Licorice, which that's not confirmed yet, but like the thing is, if you're TSM, you can outbid FlyQuest and Golden Guardians. That's the thing. So that's why it's weird to not hear their name in talks for Licorice. But okay, let's say you don't, but you're getting rid of Broken Blade. Is getting Impact better than Broken Blade? I don't think so either. For the same reason I just mentioned about why you would want Licorice. And so I think that TSM, by the sounds of things, is losing the offseason, honestly. That's what I think. It's early to say that. It's not confirmed yet. We still, maybe they can make a splash. And honestly, I'm starting to wonder, I asked you this earlier, maybe they have some crazy import top laner that they're after. I don't know. Maybe they go after, I don't know, there's so many good top laners around the world, so you can insert so many names here, but maybe they go after someone that can hard carry like Bin or something. Do I think Bin's going to come to NA? No, I don't. But you're getting my point here. I just don't see why you would get rid of Broken Blade. Why? Something's not adding up. So there's a little bit more info that we need on that. But I'm sure we'll get some within a week's time, I would say.
Mm-hmm. Moving on to the next high-profile player that was definitely, this was the sort of news that followed this whole TSM Immortals Drama that, is pretty much at the center of North American free agency right now. PERKZ, G2, AD Carry, former mid laner, who now, if all the reports are true, which are pointing to be true, wants to play mid lane again. From what we've heard, this is again from Jacob Wolf, PERKZ's buyout is just shy of $5 million, which is pretty crazy. I think that's probably the highest buyout that we've ever heard.
Yeah.
And one of
specifically for Cloud9, right? We don't know if all the other teams offered him that, just to be clear.
Oh, is that what Cloud9 offered? Is that what the news was?
Well, Cloud9 is the front runner, but like the teams that were in talks with G2
were
C9, e.g. 100 Thieves. I'm sure 100 Thieves didn't offer $5 million for him. That's what I'm trying to say.
Yes, probably. Most likely C9 is the highest bidder. That we could probably safely assume that.
Yeah, the rumors are that C9 is the highest bidder, but I guess we can't absolutely confirm that until ink is, hitting the paper. And again, that can't happen until November 16th. But for now, it sounds like Cloud9 won the bid anyway.
Yeah, reportedly G2 has been in talks with Cloud9, Evil Geniuses, 100 Thieves, TSM, so those 4 teams from North America, and also Vitality and Misfits from the LEC, and they supposedly declined transfer talks with Fnatic. And I think that's been, a lot of people, that has sparked a whole another storyline that we will touch on a little bit later. But G2 obviously shouldn't look to be selling their best available player to their rival team.
Well, that's debated, right? I mean, most people would say no. I actually, do you mind? I prefer if we talk about that now, the whole where should we sell him? Can we get that?
Yeah,
I would prefer to start with that because I am on the side of I don't think you want to send him to the rival team. That I can understand. Where I feel really bad is that he's actually being sent to North America. And while for us, we're fired up, one of the greatest Western players of all time, if not the greatest, is coming to North America. That's huge news. But let's be honest. North America, as soon as you go to North America, your chances of winning worlds goes down significantly. And if we're talking about the greatest player of all time greatest Western player of all time, I think that feels so bad for him to have his career just kind of, I don't want to say ended because it's not ended, but pretty close to, don't you think?
Yeah, I mean, there was I just want to reference an interview that I believe Bwipo did at All Stars in 2019, where he basically said that if you're playing on a European team, if you're not playing on G2 or Fnatic, you're going to have no chance at performing well internationally because you're constantly going to get outplayed. You're going to get outperformed by both G2 and Fnatic. So, I mean, I'm more on the side of the argument that if you can't be on either of those two teams, you should try to go to North America to be on one of the top teams.
Here's what I'll say, though, because I don't believe that is absolutely true. I think that there's a very good chance that is true, but I don't think that's 100%. Like, okay, we saw Origin fall off a cliff, right, in summer, and they were pretty bad. They finished 10th. But in spring, they were a really good team, and they looked really good playing against Fnatic and against G2. And so, honestly,
spring split doesn't matter.
Kick W. if you were to fill in Nuke Duck with PERKZ on that lineup, I think that's a pretty damn freaking good team now, right? So, like, yeah, neither of them is Fnatic, neither of them is G2, but one player move when you have a player as good as PERKZ can actually make that difference. So, and just to be clear, when Bwipo was doing that interview, he was referencing Broxa, right? That was Broxa coming to North America. He was basically saying he doesn't blame Broxa for coming to North America because there was no spot for him on Fnatic or on G2. In that scenario, I believe 100% it's true. I don't think Broxa is the game changer. But PERKZ is that game changer. Like, PERKZ is way up here in comparison to Broxa, who's a little bit lower,
Yeah, I mean, I can definitely
understand a little bit of a difference there.
I can definitely understand, that point that there are some strong EU teams that you can succeed on. But at least if you just take a look at the landscape right now, there's not a European team that would outperform G2 and Fnatic based on the moves that have already been made. Maybe Origin, if they still had Alphari and Xerxes. Who knows? Maybe.
But they gone.
Yeah, like, I mean, people had a lot of faith in Mad.
Gone too.
Yeah, I mean, people had a lot of faith in Mad Lions, but we saw how they performed at Worlds, and they're kind of hoping for a bounce back start to the next season. But if I'm PERKZ, I'm definitely looking towards NA if I can't get on G2 or Fnatic.
And what we don't know, so there was on PERKZ's stream, there was some videos or some clips that were released, basically of him saying that, like, I don't know, he went into this whole long spiel about wolves and sheep or something.
Yeah, the wolf and the
But
sheep.
the gist of it is that he didn't seem too happy with what was going on, but he said that he couldn't say too much. But basically, you got the idea that PERKZ is not happy, but you don't know if he's not happy because he's being sent to North America, or you don't know if he's not happy because he can't be sent to Fnatic.
Yeah.
Maybe and maybe it's both. Honestly, it could be both. But like, maybe he's not getting the same offer. Like, maybe the pay that he'll get from Vitality or Misfits is so low that it's like that's why he's pissed. Even if he could stay in the LEC, he's still pissed anyways because he's not making bank. So I don't know. It feels like he thinks he's getting screwed over by Carlos. Some people are on the yes he is side. Some people are on the no he isn't. But what I will say is that he definitely feels like him going to North America is a almost career-ending thing for him, and I think that just sucks. Could you imagine if, I don't know, let's use an example of another league, like if Tom Brady got sold to the NFL, you'd be like, "Whoa, this is the greatest player our league has ever had." How can you send him to an area where like there's no chance of a championship? You know what I'm saying? And it
Yeah.
is a little bit apples and oranges because it's not the same, but that is pretty close, wouldn't you say? If Tom Brady got traded to the CFL, people would be losing their freaking minds.
Yeah, I mean, the thing, while I understand the whole point being, about NA and them obviously not up to par with everyone else internationally, so, how can you really make the argument that if you want to perform well internationally, if you can't be on Fnatic or G2, go to NA to be on one of the top NA teams? But one thing that, and again, maybe this is me being a little bit biased as a Cloud9 fan, but taking a look at their previous season, like, you gotta, like, in Spring Split, I think everybody believed that Cloud9 Spring 2020 winners were better than G2 who won Spring in 2020 because G2 was hard slumping in the 2020 season. I think most people were of the opinion that, that current Cloud9 roster would beat that G2 roster if they were to have played at MSI.
I would say it's probably split.
Okay,
and the reason why I think it's split is because people throw way too much weight on it's an NA team, they must be bad. Oh, it's an EU team, they must be good. Like,
yeah,
I know I'm biased because obviously I'm an NA fan, but I strongly believe I watch all the LEC games. I watch all the LCS games. It is not as significant as people think. It is at the top usually, but not this year. Not this year. Like G2 and Fnatic this year, I've said this a billion times now. Those teams were not that good. Last year, huge gap between Fnatic and G2 and the NA orgs. Absolutely, but not this year.
Well, the point that I'm trying to make is, this C9 roster, while yes, it kind of had a huge collapse and ultimately failed at the end of the season, like, this roster still has a ton of potential.
Yeah.
Like, even in
I would say there's potential, yeah.
Even in the summer split, like, you had Sven and Vulcan, who were still performing, in my opinion, like a top 2 bot lane in the league. The only bot lane I put them behind would have been, what's their faces? FBI and Huhi. And you had Blabber, who, yes, while he had a bad playoffs, he still was the second best jungler in the league in the summer season, finished second in All-Pro voting. And Licorice and Niski were still solid solo lane players. So, I think if PERKZ were to join C9, this is definitely the favorite in North America, in my opinion, even over Team Liquid and the roster moves that they've made, because I think PERKZ is such a massive upgrade to that team, and is, we'll have to see. He'll be coming back to the mid lane role, but I would put him as the best mid laner in the league if that were to happen. And
he will be the best mid laner.
Yeah.
I don't think people will debate that.
Yeah, but my point is that there's still a ton of potential on this NA roster, and with them kind of hitting the restart button like a little bit with getting rid of Licorice and Reaper, and if this PERKZ move were to happen, they'd be getting rid of Niski as well. Like, this team is going to have like so much potential, even to perform at the international level, and it'd be a pretty massive failure if C9 wasn't able to succeed by adding PERKZ.
One thing I want to touch on about Niski specifically is I think people forget just how effective this guy was in spring. For those that don't remember, in spring split, it was like neck and neck between him and Blabber for spring MVP. I think people forget that. People always remember Blabber was the MVP and how much he popped off, but the only reason for me that Blabber was able to play the way he played was because he had a mid laner that enables his playstyle, who is just shoving Roman supportive of his jungler. And so that's something that I am a little bit worried of. I don't remember, like, it's been so long since we've seen Yeah, we saw him play uh mid in spring, but it's been a long time since we've seen PERKZ. You know what I'm saying? Like, what was it, 2018,
Yeah. 2018.
2018, since we've really seen, and I don't remember exactly what his play style was, if I'm being completely honest. And so I wonder if that would be my only issue with that is you go out, you spend approximately $5 million for the buyout, then you pay for his contract, and then you have a mid laner and jungle that don't work so well together. That would be my main concern. That's a very expensive mistake if it is a mistake.
Yeah, I mean, for myself, I wouldn't see like PERKZ is a good enough player to where he can adapt to, what's ever needed, and who knows, maybe it would actually be Blabber who's the one that has to change up his playstyle to better support
Perhaps.
PERKZ.
Yep.
But I mean, like, this is a guy who literally swapped roles and maintained his level of play and was, I think, considered one of the best players in his role at the World Championship in 2019 when he was playing AD carry for G2. He was like, you put him right behind LWX, and that was about it. So I have full confidence in PERKZ's ability to potentially, like, I say role, but I don't actually like mean league like position role, but like to potentially change his role within a team and work to the best of his ability to working with the other players and meshing together well.
Yeah, no, I think that's accurate, but I mean, I think, yeah, it's just I don't know what the word is, some caution, I guess, that I think that you need to consider when you're making these kind of deals. And the other thing is too is that my point in saying that as well is that Niski is still a very good piece, and like, he is now available. There's lots of teams in the LCS that should really want Niski, or even Palafox, right? Like, what does this mean for the rest of the mid laners in the league? We hear that PoE might be going to TSM. That guy's gonna get paid. You know what I'm saying? And I wonder if Jensen making as much as he is making will make PERKZ even paid even more now. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Probably.
Like, that's another thing to consider. The Jensen contract was 3 years, 4.2 million. Well, guess what? That means PERKZ is going to make some freaking bank too. Like, there's a lot of moving things happening right now.
Yeah.
One of the last things that I want to talk about with the PERKZ thing is, do you think that TSM was seriously in the running? And this goes back to the Lena thing for me, anyways, because it makes me wonder if they weren't actually in the running. And like I said, we can't know whether, like, what is his name, Paul Decci or whatever, the Immortals guy. We don't know if there's any validity to what he said, but if there was any proof of this, would be it, right? That they weren't able to get PERKZ, and like, you got either outbid, or maybe they just didn't want to go to TSM. I don't know what it is, but the point is they lost in this, right?
I mean, yeah, I mean, it was still going back to what Jacob Wolf reported, like TSM was in talks supposedly, but yeah, we don't know exactly like how big those talks were, or like, what the dollar signs were on their supposed deals or whatever. But it's all dependent. I mean, with TSM, it's kind of hard because I think TSM is in a very volatile state right now in terms of their performances and how the team is going to look. Because I've really been thinking about it more and more, and like, I still stand by my previous statement. Like, if they do not get the best players available in the offseason, they are going to be severely worse than their previous seasons, or than this previous season. Like, you have Bjergsen, who was, during playoffs, the best player in the league, and I think most people would agree, carried them through playoffs to winning their championship.
Yeah.
He's now
I would say it was him and Broken Blade, but yeah, or just their top side.
Yeah.
Mid jungle top, definitely not bot lane,
but
that's for sure.
Majority Bjergsen. You would agree, yes?
Yep, absolutely.
He is no longer on the team anymore as a player. He is a coach. Yes, while he's still a very good player, he will be moving into this new role for the first time, which is going to have its struggles. So you're already downgrading at mid. You're getting rid of Broken Blade, and we'll have to see, what their top laner is going to be. I know we've talked about Licorice Impact. Obviously, Licorice is the better option of the two. But, taking a look at Broken Blade also had a very good playoff series in North America and was beating players like Licorice and was beating players like Impact. So by getting rid of him and getting, one of those other two options, that could potentially be a downgrade. And as support, the support is really unknown for TSM, whether they're going to get Ignar to go along with Power of Evil, whether they might, re-promote treats or something like that. Like, we really don't know what TSM support situation is going to be, but, to my thinking right now is they're going to have 2 downgrades in solo lanes unless they're able to acquire Licorice, with one of those downgrades being the best player in the league in PERKZ. So I don't know.
Right.
I think,
And like,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah, it's just TSM is going to be in a very volatile state because they're going to have to switch up so many different things.
Yeah, and again, the off season is not over yet. It hasn't even technically started.
Yeah,
Technically,
contractually, it has not
so
started.
maybe right. So maybe they do have some miracle signing. I don't know. It makes me wonder with all of those teams. So we mentioned Cloud9, EG, 100 Thieves, TSM, Vitality, and Misfits. If only one of those guys is buying PERKZ or buying the contract for PERKZ, that means you got 5 other teams that were very willing to spend. 3 of them being from the LCS. So to me, it's not out of the realm of possibility that we see EG, 100 Thieves, or TSM throw that PERKZ money, if you will, towards another import. Who knows who that would be? I don't can't speculate just yet. But like I said, I just don't think teams are done yet. They're not done trying to make moves.
Hmm.
But let's move on into some of the other rumored signings and players getting dropped and whatnot. Let's start with the Broken Blade one, right? Because if we're still talking about TSM, let's start there. Um,
Yep.
Broken Blade was rumored to be going to Schalke, right?
Yep.
So what are your thoughts on that?
I don't know. I for the people who don't know or don't watch too much LEC, Schalke sort of had like a miracle run in the summer season in the LEC. I believe they
Yep.
started 0-8, or maybe it was
Yes.
0-9.
No, 0-8, I'm pretty sure.
Okay.
I remember they think they beat Fnatic to avoid the 0-9 start.
Okay. Well, they started off the season 0-8 and finished the season off 8-10 to make the LEC playoffs as the 5th seed, I believe, or maybe it was the 6th seed, but it was one of those two, fifth or 6th seeds, and then ended up finishing 5th in the LEC playoffs, just putting them 1 spot out of a world spot because LEC obviously acquired an extra world spot this season, which was filled by Mad Lions.
Yeah, this team was looking really, really good, and I don't know. I guess they're not too huge on Odoamne anymore, who he would be replacing if this is in fact true. But my initial thoughts are like, I'm surprised that the LCS doesn't have a team that's able to. Maybe Broken Blade just doesn't want to be part of the LCS anymore. Maybe he thinks that his chances of winning are in another region. So maybe that's why he could be rumored to be going to Europe. Um, but I think that he will get better. I think that Broken Blade had a little bit of an off year. Summer playoffs he looked a lot better, but spring he looked pretty bad. For his level of play, let's say pretty bad. He
Mm-hmm.
didn't look awful, but he didn't look like himself. And I think that his play style will do much better in Europe, and he'll be able to get better practice in Europe, where it's not just playing against a bunch of tanks and just smashing all the time. Now you actually have to play against other top laners that are going to try to win lane, which is again, like I said, that's what's important when it comes time for Worlds. That's the kind of play style you see. And well, Broken Blade kind of got abused a little bit at this World. I mean, the whole roster did, if we're being completely honest.
Yeah.
But I just think that with time, I actually think that he'll struggle to start. But I think with time, he'll just become a better top laner playing in the LEC than he would playing in the LCS.
Yeah, I think it's a good move regardless. Next up, we have Xerxes rumored to join Immortals, sort of to pair with Gyotto, their new head coach signing, which makes a lot of sense. Both of them are former Origin players. Xerxes kind of seeming to follow Gyotto and kind of is going to be the centerpiece of this Immortals rebuild. I think it's a very good signing.
Me too.
If whether they're going to bring in more players, or if they're going to continue to stick with their young solo laners of Alorm and Insanity. But signing him makes me think that they're going to lean towards the side of potentially getting new players, because Xerxes is kind of at the peak of his career at the moment. He had a very good, I believe it was season 8 that he played his last season with the Unicorns of Love. They did very well. He was one of the best junglers in the league, and then he got a good contract to go to Immortals, to which he had a very good season, minus the end of it when Immortals kind of fell off a cliff and ended up being the 10th place team. But I think he's a very solid player, and he's definitely a good centerpiece to start this rebuild around, and pairing him with Gyotto will definitely, should have some good results if they can figure out the rest of this roster.
I was very surprised by this. I didn't think that you would be able to convince someone like of his level of play to join a bottom LCS team. Like, this is not the best jungler in Europe, but this is a pretty damn good jungler. And so I think this is a huge win for Immortals being able to sign a guy like this. I was curious when they let go of Xmithy. I was like, who do you got planned to come over? This to me is an upgrade. I think that Xmithy is towards the end of his career. Well, I mean, maybe not the end because his career never freaking ends, but he is definitely on a downtrend, I would say. And I think Xerxes would be the better jungler. And I think that Immortals getting this jungler made their team just a little bit better. And it also gives a little bit extra incentive for other players to want to come to your team. We talk about how these bottom teams need to make some big signings and get some good players in order to have other good players want to come to your roster. This is one of them for me. So I think hats off to Immortals. Good start for the offseason for a team that everyone expects to lose the offseason pretty hard.
Next up, we have Cody Sun and 100 Thieves sort of mutually agreeing to part ways. Obviously, this is going to make Cody Sun a free agent. And Immortals will be... Things. Yeah, Immortals is looking for a new AD carry.
So a couple of things for me that I want to ask. One, where do we think he's going? Because this guy ain't done. Like, this guy's good. I want to remind people that he didn't have a great 2020, but I also want to remind people that he played with Poom and Stunt. He did not, like, I'm just saying, like, he did not have a good year, and I think people are gonna think low of him because of that. But this is still a good 80 carry. I can't wait to see what team he gets on. I think he's very good. And the other thing that I want to ask is, do you think 100 Thieves has FBI or Johnson already in their pocket?
Oh man, I don't know. It's kind of interesting to, like, because the thing with the 100 Thieves is right now, like, with this move being made, like, what the fuck is their roster going to be? The only person confirmed, like, before, we knew that at least they had top and 80 carry, but now they only have top. And I don't think they'll continue with contracts. I highly doubt that. So either. I highly doubt that Ryoma is going to be playing in a starting LCS or Academy team in North America. Poom and Stunt, that was, we don't even need to discuss that.
And, I'll give you the roster if you want.
Okay, well, but and Cody Sun's gone now, so I think there's a lot of holes for this roster to fill, and like maybe they needed to get rid of Cody Sun to be able to make a bid for one of these high profile 80 carries like a Johnson, like an FBI, but I have straight up no clue what's going on with this team now.
So here's my prediction, if you will. I don't even want to call it a prediction because I think it is a long shot, but a very possible one. I think you got someday top, and I just want to remind people he's no longer an import. He is now a resident. So you got...
Yes.
What did I say? Did I say impact?
No, you said import.
Okay, good.
You said someday is no longer an import. Yeah.
Okay, good. Okay, yes, someday. And then here's where I think you go after Broxa. I think there's not a lot of good junglers out there. I just want to remind people that out of the remaining junglers for North America, or that would play in North America, I think you're kind of stuck with Broxa or Xmithy. Other than that, you got to go down to, like, well, you could keep contracts, or you could go with round 3 of Meteos.
Yikes.
Just other things that I just don't think will happen. And I think clearly they're looking to spend if they're putting out bids. PERKZ, I think they're going to put that spending towards Broxa and Niski, and I think that's a very good mid jungle duo. I think that Broxa was very good in Europe when he was able to play aggressive. He came over to Team Liquid and struggled on a team that played slow. How about now you've got Niski, who likes to play for his jungler. Now you can have Broxa and Niski. I think that would be a very good mid jungle duo, and then you sign FBI and Huhi. I think that there's a chance. We don't know if Golden Guardians is going to let go of these guys, but there was word that FBI was being shopped for by other teams. Maybe some of that PERKZ money goes towards that as well. And then Huhi was a player who played for 100 Thieves before. From what I could tell, they didn't end on bad terms. I don't think there was any hard feelings there. He was the mid laner, although let's just preface that. But I think that there's a good chance that FBI and Huki would want to play together again. If they were the best bot lane in the LCS for summer, why not stick together? So that is a roster that I think would be, 1, very competitive, and 2, possible. Now that you have Someday as no longer taking up an import slot.
Gonna have to break the bank on this roster. Jeez.
Yes, you would. So you absolutely would. However, the reason why I think this will happen is there's been a lot of flack for 100 Thieves saying that they're just an apparel brand, and they have said, like, we don't want to be looked at as just an apparel and a content creation team. We want to win. Well, guess what? If you want to not be painted with the same brush all the time, you're going to have to make new things happen. And you can't just go in with a budget roster again like you did last year. I think they're going to want to spend. I think that's the reason why we saw them going after PERKZ, is because they are able to spend. If you can't spend, you're not going after PERKZ in the first place. So I
Yeah.
think this roster will spend, and I think that's the roster that they're going to go after, and I think it's possible. That
Okay, we will have to see.
if they don't get FBI, they take Johnson.
Yeah, a lot of question marks for this 100 Thieves roster. Next up, we've already talked about them a bunch, but TSM, Power of Evil, is rumored to join TSM after the news that he was declining his player option on his contract a couple days prior. So that would put Power of Evil as the successor to Bjergsen and TSM's third mid laner. I know we've talked a lot about TSM already, but I don't know if you have any additional thoughts on how this move affects their offseason.
I have a little bit. I just think what's interesting to me is that this move is a win-lose. Like, you won a little bit because you got a good mid laner, right? But I mentioned either last episode or 2 episodes ago, I mentioned that the worst case scenario for TSM is to get Power of Evil and Ignar. And, well, I think that's what's going to happen. Honestly, I think Ignar is probably going to end up going with PoE over to TSM. And even so, you win because you get 2 good players, but you lose because I think that was the worst case scenario. Like, you have the money to spend on PoE and Ignar. There's no money issue with your TSM. They've got money. But yeah, I just think that this was the worst case scenario and it ended up happening. But again, it's still a win. These are good players. These are 2 guys that just went to Worlds. So, like, to me, that seems pretty good. And by the way, there's no rumor out there about Ignar following PoE or anything like that. There's no word on that. I just think that it's fair to say these guys have played together on multiple teams. I think it only makes sense that both of them want to be on a winning team, and both of them want to probably play together, and both of them probably want to get paid. And I think all of that can happen at TSM. So I think that's what's probably going to happen there.
One last thing I will add. I do actually think that Power of Evil will be a good match to sort of fit into, with Bjergsen being the head coach, because I do think they have similar play styles in the sense that they do like to play heavily around mid lane in terms of control mages and, not necessarily like playing more of the Niski style where you're shoving and roaming and assisting your jungler. It's more of, using your mid lane control to affect areas of the map, whether that's early, mid, or top lane dives, because we saw that a ton with Bjergsen. We'd see constant 4-man bot lanes from TSM on red side, or constant 3-mans on top side when TSM was on blue side. So I do think that Power of Evil will actually fit quite well if Bjergsen wants to sort of plug and play with the TSM roster, if he kind of just wants to kind of use his play style as a foundation for what he wants to achieve with the TSM team. And I think PoE is actually a decent fit for that.
Yeah, they're 2 guys that would win lane a lot. The slight difference is Bjergsen was a little bit more supportive in his champion pool, right? With like the Zillion and the set and stuff like that. Whereas Power of Evil was more, I'm going to play Orianna and Syndra and I'm going to smash you in lane and then take over the game with a 5-man shockwave kind of stuff. But anyways, we'll wait and see if that materializes. But let's move on. What else we got?
Last up, that actually just came out today, this news. LEC related, not NA related. But Misfits is going to supposedly buy out Vander's contract from Rogue. Rogue, one of the 4 European teams that went to Worlds. Didn't have a great Worlds, but they were kind of in a group of death scenario with Damwon and JDG. And at that time, I don't think anybody was predicting Rogue to get out of that group. But Vander is actually a very solid player, kind of had a career resurgence ever since he was brought into Schalke a couple years prior, and then joined Rogue and kind of made Rogue a top LEC team in Season 10. And, for Misfits, it's pretty good.
Yeah, not much to say on that. Good signing. Unlucky for Rogue.
Yeah. And next up, we're going to continue on our NA roster predictions. And kind of using all this new information that we've gained and either, changing up our predictions or, with the new players that are available, more predictions on what we think could happen.
Yeah, go for it. I'll let you, because I've pretty much said a lot of mine just through our talks already. I do have one more, but yeah, well, I'll let you start with this one.
Yeah, I think for me, not a lot has changed with my predictions. The main one that I do think after all this news with TSM, I get more TSM, whatever. But it's kind of trending more towards Impact that's going to be joining this team. And, it seems like their bigger signings are going to be Power of Evil and Ignar, and with the according to the reports, sort of them not having a lot of interest in Licorice, or at least not being one of those top two bidders for Licorice, it probably does make it seem that like Impact is going to be the more likely choice out of the two, because I feel like, I don't know, I just feel like if TSM really wanted to get Licorice, they would have been in that one or two, and they would have been those teams that have been reported on Licorice. So it makes me think that Impact is probably going to end up going to TSM, and he's sort of going to fill just like the normal Impact role of like, you're going to be a weak side player, play tanks, you're going to play Ornn, you're going to play Shen, and we're going to let the rest of the team do the hard carrying, and bringing in a guy like Power of Evil, who is a very hard carry and a very resource heavy player, I think will support quite well, although they will be taking the worst of the two players.
I will say that TSM does show like they like to play with the Shen pick a lot, so that's a little plus. I mean, you're only a ban away from making sure that doesn't happen, so that's not crazy news. But I will say that the Shen thing does make sense to me. On Impact is a very good Shen player, and they like to play that. But yeah, no, I agree. It's weird to me because I have it in my notes. Impact TSM ? And those are not question marks like, oh, this is interesting. These are question marks that is like, that's it. Like, like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
you get a Broken Blade for this, but I mean, we don't need to go over that again. Yeah. Another thing that I had in my notes here was just that the Broxa and Niski duo thing that I talked about for 100 Thieves, that doesn't necessarily have to be exclusive to 100 Thieves. That could still be a duo that goes and plays, I don't know, maybe for FlyQuest or something like that. Maybe FlyQuest goes after Niski and Broxa, or maybe Niski does go over to Golden Guardians, because we do know that although Demonte was serviceable, and I would say he was good, he wasn't amazing. And I think Niski is a definite upgrade, and we know that him and Closer are really good friends, as they both came from the Turkish league. So that's another thing that I want to say. Now that Niski, if the PERKZ thing does come to fruition and Niski is no longer on Cloud9, I could see Golden Guardians going after Niski and doing the whole Niski Closer mid jungle duo.
Yeah, the other place that I think that if EG doesn't win out on the PERKZ sweepstakes, I think Niski would actually be a really good fit for EG. Kind of pairing up with Sven Skaren again. Obviously, when Sven Skaren won MVP in summer of Season 9, he had Niski as his mid laner, and he not necessarily did the full like support mid style that he did with Blabber in Season 10, but he definitely did, aid Sven Skaren a ton in his aggressive jungling, and kind of made Sven Skaren a better player. So I think if EG isn't able to win out on PERKZ, and if he goes to C9 and therefore Niski becomes available, I think Niski would actually be a really good fit with EG. And, if EG, maybe they don't spend all that money on PERKZ, they spend it on like a Johnson or an FBI. And like that'd be a pretty damn good roster.
Or maybe they spend it on like a Licorice and like a Sven Skaren, Niski, and then who knows, maybe they go after like Sneaky or something. And then they could have like Zazel finish out the support.
They just have season 9 Cloud9 as their roster for 2021.
Dude, it's actually, the thing is, it's incredibly unlikely, but it is possible.
Yeah,
it is possible, which is freaking hilarious, by the way.
Yeah.
Still no word on Sneaky since the Dignitas stuff, eh?
Yeah, we'll have to see.
No word on him.
Yeah, I don't know. It's sad because like I want Johnson to stay on Dignitas, so I don't really want Sneaky to come back to the LCS, because from what we've heard, the only option for Sneaky at the moment is Dignitas. And I want Johnson to stay on Dig, so Sneaky can stay a streamer.
Hear me out here, though. Hear me out. So I definitely want Sneaky back in the league, and I do want Dignitas to stay, or Johnson to stay on Dignitas. However, I did this similar take on Hotline League a couple weeks ago, and Mark made the really good point that maybe this is like freeing Johnson to go to a good team and actually be able to perform. Like if Johnson is no longer on Dignitas, now he's not being held back by, I don't even know who their GM is, but I'm not impressed. You know what I'm saying? Like maybe this is his chance to go to a good team. I think it would be great if he went to 100 Thieves. I would love a 100 Thieves Johnson jersey. That would be huge. So maybe that's how it goes. Maybe 100 Thieves isn't going after FBI, and instead they are going after Johnson. Who knows? To be determined. But anyways, just a quick thought there.
Yeah, not too much more that I got. The only thing that I kind of touched on a little bit already is Immortals and how bringing in Xerxes kind of affects the rest of how their roster is going to look. Because I do feel that with Giotto coming as their head coach and one of their imports already being a former LEC player that he has worked with, I definitely think that Immortals' other import slot is most likely going to be some type of LEC player that Giotto has worked with in the past. So that would make, and presumably they would use that on a solo laner. So that makes me think that there's a less likely chance of Insanity and Alorum starting on that team. But I definitely think that for Immortals, like these are two players that you want to hang on to, whether or not you start them and try to mold them into a good player. But I definitely think they're solid players that need to get developed a little bit more before they can be like true LCS level players.
And I also want to bring up that like there's still some players that we have not heard almost anything about who are still serviceable players. I'm thinking of Pobelter, honestly. Like
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that he'll be back on CLG. Maybe he will. I mean, if there's one piece that I think CLG would want to keep, it would be him. But
Yep.
I think that there's enough. Like I think there's still enough demand for Pobelter to go back to a team like FlyQuest maybe, or to go to Immortals. Like I think that those are two teams he has played for in the past, and it's very possible that he goes there. And maybe he reunites with Cody Sun on Immortals. Maybe they
Maybe.
got like I don't know what the rest of the lineup is yet, but so far that doesn't sound bad. If you have Xerxes jungle, Pobelter mid, and Cody Sun AD, I think that's all right.
Yeah.
I think that's starting to build a decent team. Nothing amazing, but a team that is serviceable, and I think would definitely be upgrades for. Well, it would be an upgrade for Cody Sun, it would be an upgrade for Xerxes, and an upgrade for Pobelter as far as where I think they would finish. Because all of those three players came from teams that finished pretty low in their standings, and so I think that would be an upgrade for all three of those guys, depending, of course, on who their top and support would be.
Not much else I got. It's gonna be a really interesting free agency period. I think
Yeah.
once the dominoes start falling, we're gonna see a lot of we're definitely there's gonna be a lot of roster turnover in terms of new players on different teams and new
There
players
always
coming into the
is.
league.
There always is, and like I said before, with like all those teams going after PERKZ, there is still a lot of money to be thrown around,
Yep.
right? So to be determined. I'm sure we'll have more. Like I said before, it's November 16th is when free agency officially starts, and so as we approach that day, we're going to get more and more news, and we'll have more and more things to talk about. And like you said, the dominoes, right? As soon as one or two pieces fall, the rest are going to come with. But
Mm-hmm.
let's hop over to quick news and fill in our listeners on the rest of the little things that are happening around the LCS world.
Yep. Kind of I don't know if this is fairly relevant actually, and I think was surprising to a lot of people. But ESPN Esports is releasing pretty much all of their league journalists, those being Jacob Wolf, Emily Rand, and that Fion on Fire guy. Who I'm sorry, but that guy's terrible. And I have his tweets like blocked and muted because I hate seeing that guy in my Twitter feed.
I unfollowed him as well.
I
Honestly,
didn't. That's the thing. I didn't even have him followed, but since I follow so many other league stuff, his shit just ends up in my timeline. So I had to go to his page and purposefully mute him.
you're making me wonder if I did block him. I don't think I did,
That
but
guy
I
is
don't see his
staying
tweets
blocked.
anymore. Yeah, it's. I mean, I don't want to get into a let's hate on this guy thing, but I mean, yeah, I don't like his tweets either.
Yeah.
Anyways, um, is it? I should have looked into this. Is it just the LCS people at
From what we've heard
ESPN, or
so
is it all
far,
of them?
it's just the league
Okay,
people.
because like honestly, if you're not making money in League of Legends, I don't know where you're making money for like ESPN specifically in
Yeah.
esports, right? I don't know. Like you can't tell me you're going to some Tekken tournament cleaning up on you
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? Like I know ESPN does some fighting game stuff, and so that's what makes me think of that. But anyway, regardless,
Hmm.
what's next?
Next up, we got a bit like a controversy with Cloud9 and them signing General Sniper as a streamer. They basically signed him, and there was a whole announcement about it. And then about 4 hours later, they followed that announcement up by releasing him because their intended purpose to sign him as a streamer, to then both sign as a streamer and compete in this like amateur tournament. There was some whole misunderstanding with the rules and how C9 was. It's seeming we've talked about this, and we're under the impression that C9 was trying to find a little loophole in the system and play an underage player in this tournament if you were to sign him as a streamer instead of a pro player, because apparently the rule is you need to be over the age of 15 to compete as a player in these amateur tournaments, but there's no age restriction on signing people as streamers to organizations. So that's what we kind of assumed, that they were trying to find some little loophole. But he got signed, he got a bunch of hype for about 4 hours, and then he was gone.
I said this, maybe it was to you or maybe it was to Tommy, one of our friends, for those that don't know, but I said this to someone. I said, like, I won't be surprised when an organization tries to sign this guy. Did I say that to you?
I don't know.
I think
you might have.
I think it was,
you mean this was before he got
Tommy.
signed by Cloud9?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh yeah, you said that to me
2 or 3 weeks ago.
Yeah, you said that
2 or
to
3
me.
weeks ago. But I think Tommy was pretty upset, if I remember right. I don't think Tommy was like, no, teams shouldn't do that or won't do that. I'm like, I think they're gonna do that. But anyways, yeah, this is like not outside of, like we talked about. You mentioned how C9 could be looking for some loopholes. This is not out of C9's character to do this.
Mm-hmm.
For those that don't remember, they did kind of look for some loopholes for the whole equity thing. Basically, players aren't allowed to own equity in their teams, but C9 in the contracts that they were signing with their players, like Jensen and Sneaky, had equity in them. And obviously there's a conflict of interest if you're part owner of a team, but like Jensen is now playing for Team Liquid, like that's a problem there. And while Cloud9 still found a way to get, to give equity to their players, and they got a slap on the wrist and a fine for that. And so, yeah, this is not surprising to me that C9 would try to do something a little sneaky, honestly.
Yeah.
No pun intended.
Oh, Jesus.
Yeah.
Okay, next up was some fairly notable news at the time, but not gonna lie, we kind of we kind of bean souped ourselves here, because we straight up just forgot to talk about this topic last week. And so, for the people who probably have already heard, but it's kind of old news at this point, LS is rumored to join T1, formerly SKT, the team with Faker on it. Everybody should know that. Going to sign with T1 as, I don't know if he's exactly the head coach or he's supposed to be on the T1 coaching staff for the upcoming 2021 season. And obviously, when this happened, it was very big news and very talked about, but we just forgot to talk about it. But we're going to talk about it now, just a little bit.
Bean Soup Award goes to us. That's for sure. But one thing I will say is that when this news broke, there wasn't that much about it yet. There was only the news that it was a leak.
Yeah.
And what seemed to follow throughout the rest of the week was a little bit of drama around it, because, well, LS, I guess he was getting some threats and he had to get off social media, and apparently people were reaching out to his grandma and maybe even threatening his grandma, which is like, are you freaking kidding me, man? How does it even come to that?
Yeah.
Regardless, one way or another, things weren't going too well when this news dropped. And honestly, you and I have talked a little bit about this, but maybe that's enough to deter LS from wanting to take it. Maybe he decides against it if, like, his family's starting to get involved and whatnot. And we know he's already set in the position that he does right now, where he's on countless talk shows. He makes great money. He's a caster. Like, I don't think you can get any more well respected from the league, from just the League of Legends scene than he is. And so maybe there's no reason for him to take this risk, if you will. But again, we've also said that some people just have that competitive drive, right? They want to compete, they want to be part of a team and go for a championship, and maybe that's what's driving him.
Yeah.
But it's unfortunate that the cost of him just wanting to coach a really respected org comes with so much backlash from some of the fans. It's pathetic.
Yeah, that's I kind of had those exact thoughts when this news kind of first broke. Was, LS, he kind of has everything to lose by making this move, because obviously, even just the rumored signing, he's gotten a ton of flame about it. His kind of reputation, I guess, is on the line if he chooses to sort of continue with this move. But at the same time, he does have actually a good bit to gain if he can kind of bring T1 back to their, form in the LCK and maybe potentially make Worlds in 2021. But, there's a lot to lose for LS here in terms of, his his appearance is going to be now tied to like a professional team's record. And
Yeah.
trust me, if SKT does poorly, a lot of people are just going to throw
Yikes.
all the blame to LS, and that's really going to
Yeah.
hurt his reputation. You know, he's obviously like peaking at an all-time high in terms of his popularity on Twitch and social media, and you know, this could potentially ruin all of that.
I will say though that is true with a bunch of players as well. Like for example, if Doublelift wanted to go stream, he absolutely could, but he decides to continue to compete, even though it's you. I mean, he still makes great money. Let's be honest, but he could make way more money as a streamer. But he decides to play because he wants to compete, and that's just how people who are competitive will want to find a team to play for. They don't care about the cash that they get from their streams or from fans and stuff like that. They play to win. And so I
Yeah.
think that it just shows that LS still has that competitive drive. So yeah.
Next up, we got scouting grounds. Yeah, it's terrible. I don't know what else to add about it.
Is it though? Like we haven't even watched it. It's just so uninteresting to even watch, man.
Okay, well, I mentioned that because we were literally like I was adding this into our topics of discussion for this episode, and Jamie just mentioned to me yesterday that it's actually happening right now. And I was like, what? Like this has normally been some sort of event that has like a good amount of coverage around it. Like we see a live stream of it. Like I haven't seen I follow like the LCS and Riot Games on Twitch. Like I haven't even seen anything about that. Like I haven't seen anything on Twitter saying, "Oh, Scouting Grounds is starting on November the 10th." No, I haven't seen anything about that. I even saw a couple of Reddit posts saying how bad Scouting Ground is and there's no marketing around it. And these are supposedly, where we're going to find the next best NA talent. And yeah,
I mean,
maybe, but
possible.
It's supposedly. I don't know. Maybe
Yeah.
there's been a couple of good players that have come out of it. Like Blabber was a player that originally got his notoriety from Scouting Grounds. Kumo, who is I think a solid LCS top laner, he was picking Scouting Grounds. I'm trying to think of anybody else. Palafox was a Scouting Grounds player. I'm kind of just
wasn't he? Wasn't Vulcan?
I'm kind of just naming Cloud9 players. This kind of just goes to show.
Well, I mean, but we all know that usually Cloud9 is known as the LCS team that has their talent, get better. So
I don't know if Zazel was a Scouting Grounds player, but
not to my knowledge.
The point that we're making is there are some solid players in Scouting Grounds, and with less eyes on this tournament, it just makes like the availability or like potential of these players getting playing time like even lower than it already is.
Here's what I'll say. I think the LCS teams still have their eyes firmly set on what's happening in Scouting Grounds, but it doesn't help the league as far as growing the hype around these players. Like we just mentioned a list of players that we remember seeing play in Scouting Grounds. And I don't think that's going to happen this time around, like if one of these players does eventually make it, because nobody saw it. There is no, I remember when this guy was in Scouting Grounds. It's just like, oh, where did this guy come from? And sometimes to get invested in a league is to know all the little stories of how someone made it and stuff like that. Think about Juan Feng's story. I mean, that is an extreme, but Juan Feng at Worlds, his story was so much of a reason for people to cheer for him. Knowing the player stories do matter, and this is just a missed opportunity from the LCS.
Yep. Next up, we got fairly recent news that actually came out of Cloud9's AMA, Ask Me Anything, that Jack did yesterday. But yes, Jack, the owner of C9, everyone should know that. But they also did kind of tease this a couple of weeks ago, actually. I remember them saying that they have a big announcement coming up, and this is that big announcement. They're going to be releasing what they call Stratus, which is basically a annual subscription that is supposedly for the Cloud9 superfans, where they get access to exclusive merchandise, exclusive content, more like in-depth video and stuff, which seems pretty cool. It's $500 a year, which I think is
it's freaking expensive, man.
It's expensive. Me personally, I was thinking like, I actually might enjoy this, but I think 500 is a little bit of a high price point for myself. But I do think there are a lot of people that are gonna take this as an opportunity and as Cloud9 fans to get a little bit more involved and get some cool stuff out of it.
Yeah, let's be clear about this. You're paying $500, but you're getting some pretty cool stuff. I will say that. You're getting like the Face It. I don't know, CS man, help me out. What do they call it?
Yeah, it's Face It.
I know it's called Face It, but what is it like? What is that?
Well, Face It's just like a client that you use to like play competitive matches.
For ranked in CS, right?
Yeah.
So and that comes with how much did that cost again? Again,
I don't know.
I'm
It's
wearing a CS jersey and I'm fucking noob here.
I think it's like $7 a month basically in value.
Yeah. And then you get like jerseys, and I even saw there was like some shoes and stuff, and
Yeah, like they give you like
there was some cool
exclusive
stuff.
C9 merchandise, which is,
Yeah.
if you're the kind of person who always buys a lot of stuff on the C9 store and likes to buy all their collections. Me personally, I've bought a couple things off the C9 store, but not enough where that would like warrant me purchasing the $500. But
Yeah,
I think
I
it's good
wouldn't.
for the people who like are super I mean, I'm super invested into C9, but who are super invested to the whole brand of C9, not just their esports teams.
And also have like exposable income
Also
because
true.
$500 is yeah. But anyways, I think it's cool. Would I get it myself? No, but I do think that this is something people should know about, and I think this could change for a lot of different teams in just esports in general, right? You could see that this could become one of like the huge ways in ways that teams make revenue. This could become a huge thing. I don't know. Maybe it will, maybe it won't, but definitely interesting and nice to see C9 as one of the first. I think Team Liquid was the first, but I don't think Team Liquid had anything like this planned. This seems to be on a whole nother level.
Yep. Last up, preseason changes are out. If for whatever reason you're still playing that League of Legends game, which is what we're talking about, but like if you're that interested in playing in preseason and want to enjoy some preseason cancer, go right ahead. The new items are out. Have fun. But
I've heard good things actually. I mean, I've heard some bad things as well. Like there's some shit that's completely broken, but that's expected, right?
apparently AD assassins are bonkers.
Yeah. But just talking with two of our buddies, Scott and Tommy, they were saying that they were actually enjoying it a lot.
Oh.
Steven was playing with them, but he was muted because Steven, KEKW. Anyways, from what I could tell, people are enjoying it. However, there's some really busted stuff, but that's going to happen. And here's the other thing too, because I do think this does relate to the LCS and just pro play around the world. Honestly, is like when you have that many champions in the game now, and like there's like 150 or whatever, and you do a whole overhaul of all of these items, I think it will take a long time for a meta to establish. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's figured out by the time the season starts, but it wouldn't surprise me if there is that long period of time where like the meta is shifting so quickly because there's so many things that just haven't necessarily been tried yet. But we'll see. Time will tell.
Yeah, I definitely think it will create a very volatile meta because obviously at
Definitely in
the
the early going,
well,
right?
no,
Definitely at the
I think
start.
for a long time, like for at least the whole year,
Yeah.
because at the start you're just gonna have people playing what's broken, and then obviously the broken stuff is gonna get nerfed. So that you then have to now find that second round of what's broken to play, and I
Yeah.
think that cycle will probably continue for a few patches. But then when you sort of reach the summer, I say summer, but it's all one season now. But the summer portion of the season, and then playoff and worlds times, like that's where stuff is going to become super optimized, and like that is what
Yeah.
the meta is going to be. So for me personally, I think there's going to be like the phases of you're trying to find what's broken on the patch, and you play that, and then when the dust starts to settle, people are going to start optimizing things like actually crunching the numbers and doing the kinds of things that LS and Freak do very often. If you Those are two people that I definitely think you should look out for if they're ever going to make any content about any of the items. Look at Freak and LS because they do a lot of math behind the actual item changes in terms of gold value that you're getting, depending on the person's armor and magic resist, like what items are actually like better to buy than others. Like some items that you wouldn't even know are actually that good can be good in certain situations because of the whatever stats of your opponent that they're playing, or like what the team comps look like. But I do think those are two people that if they're ever making any content around the new season, you should probably check out because it's very good.
So I didn't watch any of Freak's content, but I think he did release something.
Oh,
I don't
I
know
don't
if
know
you.
if he has. I'm just saying if there is any, or if you see any, go watch it because it's probably good.
Yeah, if you guys are interested in this kind of stuff, go have a look at Freak's Twitter. If he did something, it'll be on there, and I think he released something, but I didn't click. I wasn't not too sure. But anyways, I think that's it for this episode, right? Anything else?
Yep, that's it.
Let's wrap up the episode. Thanks everyone who came to the live show and people that were in the live chat. Thank you, obviously, to those that are still listening on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts, or any of that stuff. We appreciate all of you guys. definitely drop a follow on Twitter. They are on your screen. If you don't know how the hell to spell Tuminator, it's on there, and so it's at Tuminator _ and at BlueJ_GG. Anything else, JNT?
Nope.
I think that's pretty much it. Just drop a follow, guys. Drop a follow on Twitch. It's twitch.tv/clownfiesta podcast. Drop a sub on YouTube. We appreciate you guys. And like we said at the end of last episode, we do expect to do more episodes in the off season. We just don't know exactly when we're going to do them because, well, we want to be able to actually do an episode. Like, we went for about an hour and a half today, but we don't want to do an episode that lasts 15 minutes. That's just a waste of everyone's time, kind of. So there will be more stuff in the off season. It'll just be dependent on when news drops. So if there is big news dropping, do expect the Clown Fiesta podcast episode to follow it, and make sure to hit that bell so you get the notification.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks again, everyone. This has been episode 23 of the Clown Fiesta podcast. Take care, comb your hair.